The arsenic poisoning, deemed by like the UN and a lot of like international organizations, is like a huge problem in like the drinking water in Bangladesh. And it was actually, it's really interesting because in the 1970s, that's when the first tube wells were actually installed, and prior to that, the main drinking water concern in Bangladesh was the shallow water, because that was often contaminated with diarrheal-inducing like bacteria or viruses that led to a lot of like infant and child mortality. So that was like a huge concern. And I think the UN and a lot of like international organizations wanted to reduce those rates, and so they thought that it would be better to go deeper. And so they started in the 1970s drilling like 50 feet into the ground and then deeper to extract water not necessarily from the surface and just like more shallow groundwater. And it was really in the 90s when they started seeing a lot of cases of individuals with like lesions on their hands and like increased cardiovascular diseases. And because like arsenicosis can take, like most of it is like phenotypic, like you'll see like lesions on people's faces, it also leads to a lot of like social ostracization. It became like a huge public health concern because I think the UN and a lot of like international organizations noticed that this was because of the arsenic in their water.
So she's exhibiting the classic symptoms of
yes,
arsenic poisoning.
This means the melanosis is there, clearly visible.
Like they started testing the tube wells and noticed that there are higher levels of arsenic than that was deemed like healthy. And the healthy level, I think, according to UN, is 10 parts per billion, and in parts of Bangladesh you can get 50 is like their norm or their lowest standard. You can find 0. It's because the aquifer like ground system is very irregular, you know. It's a deltaic like landscape, and there's a lot of sediments, different sediments running off from the Himalayan mountains, and it's a very interesting sort of geographic and geologic location. You'll find even in like the southern part where it's the most highest concentration, you can get up to like over 500 parts per billion. So if you like drink that like over, you know, years and years, it's definitely like a major concern. And so I think for a lot of people, that's definitely, you know, especially when you call it like mass poisoning and like natural poisoning, chronic exposure to poisoning, I think a lot of people get very worried and get very concerned. Although when I was there, I did talk to a lot of researchers and I did a lot of my field sample collecting in like separate villages where I spent like, you know, most of my day like just hanging out by like wells, and like I couldn't like eat anything really from the village just because they didn't really have the water to clean it with. But so I guess my point is just that they have other concerns on top of the water, like they need to make a living. There's overcrowdedness, overpopulation is still a huge issue, and like general education is still like, it's not really present. So they still have other concerns, I think, that are sort of stressors on like how the national government is dividing and allocating its resources. Since I'm an environmental science major, a huge part of my thesis is really just understanding the environmental science like implications, or at least trying to understand how arsenic is naturally mobilized. And it's very interesting because there's so many theories out there, like because the Bangladesh region is rich to so many like different chemicals and different like chemical interactions, and then when you add in like, well, specifically in my project, I'm really focusing on organic carbons and their role in leading to arsenic release, because when like microbes take up the organic carbons, they sort of create, they become this the source for like mediating arsenic mobilization off of like sediments that are, the arsenic is like absorbed onto the sediments, and then the microbes, when they come to contact with organic carbons that provide them with like, you know, electrons and protons, whatever that they need for the redox reactions, they can like lead to arsenic release. And so I think my project is mostly just trying to understand the science still. There's a huge theory that the organic carbon sources may be significant, understanding the organic carbon sources may be significant in figuring out like how arsenic is naturally mobilized. Two of the main theories right now is that the organic carbon sources are like, one, like I guess just they've like simplified it to like old and young is really meant to, it's pretty broad. And I think that's kind of the weakness of this theory also, just that it's anything that's like anthropogenic or like human related, you know, so creating ponds, latrines, even irrigation, where some way people have been like contributing to, disturbing, whatever, affecting like the aquifer movements and the aquifer like mixing and recharge. So there's that theory, and the second theory is just that, you know, arsenic is just prevalent in the geologic like formation of the Bangladesh like bedrock, and so they're trying to understand, could there just be areas where there is clumps of organic carbon, because Bangladesh used to be like a lot of I think it's mainly built on like Holocene bedrock or something, which is like Holocene was like a period when it was very rich in organic matter, so there could have just been a lot of organic carbons like buried in into the sediment itself. So these are like the two main theories, although since nobody has been able to really prove like is it young or old, because people have really come into like, people have started radiocarbon dating like all these different components of the water to try and understand, like, you know, the carbon from this layer of the aquifer, like if it's this age then we can figure out this and that, but there's just a lot of confounding factors of like trying to carbon date chemicals in the water. And so that's why my mentor has focused on like radiocarbon dating microbes, because microbes, they will like they'll take up the DNA and like, or they'll take up the carbon from their surrounding environments and like generating DNA and also like their phospholipid fatty acids. So his theory is that if we look at microbes and we like we somehow can extract them in a way that doesn't introduce other forms of carbon contamination, and then we carbon date, you know, we also create like a DNA extraction method, and then we send it off to a lab to do PLFA, phospholipid fatty acid extraction. Then when we carbon date that, we should be able to figure out like if it's over a certain age, then maybe it's attributed to the geologic, like organic carbons found within like the geologic layers themselves, and if it's younger, then perhaps the you know, anthropogenic factors come into play. And this is also it's also very unique to like every location, because the aquifers are so different. You can't ever say like, oh, I found it, you know, I found that it's young here, therefore it's, you know, anthropogenic all over it. And I think it's very specific to that region. I think that's also why it's really tricky. It's just all these details that scientists haven't really been able to solve.